Welcome into the Fantasy Incline Podcast. Today, I've got Nico to my right, as always, and we have a special guest today, Stuart Devonish. Introduce yourself, Stu.
Nice to meet you guys. Name's Stu. Big fantasy guy here. Excited to be on.
Stu's been a part of our league for a while now, since the start, and we're happy to have him on today. We'll have many more guests on as the podcast goes along, so be on the lookout. So today, we're going to talk about some NFL schedule stuff because that was released recently. Um, but I want to start with 2021. So we're going to skip ahead a year and then we're going to come back a little bit here. But the new collective bargaining agreement was signed between the NFLPA and the NFL, and that goes into effect this year. But some of the things that are in it don't go into effect until next year. And the biggest one is that they are going to increase the amount of games played throughout the season uh, from 16 to 17. So it'll be an 18-week schedule with one bye, and that changes fantasy a lot because now we'll have different schedule formats for fantasy football instead of playing a 16-week regular season or a 16-week season. You're now going to play a 17-week season, and you're going to format the playoffs differently. And I'm telling you right now, listen to me right now. If you are in this year, in years previous, if you are playing fantasy football in week 17, you need to do one of three things. Either stop playing in that league, just quit that league entirely. Number two, hound your commissioner to not play in week 17 and end the season in week 16. Or number three, if you are the commissioner and you're still playing in week 17, you need to quit fantasy football. Never play it again and never listen to this podcast again. You should not be playing in week 17. I think I've made that clear. Next year, though, next year, week 17 is going to be a championship game, and we're not going to be playing in week 18. And so that changes fantasy formats. So in playoffs, you can now do things like your standard 4-team playoff with 2 weeks per game would end up starting in on week 14. So 14, 15, 16, and 17, and not playing 18. The best thing that I get out of this is that you could expand the playoffs. So you could do a 16 playoff with two buys, and your first week of the playoffs would be the play-in games for the final four teams, and without the top two teams. And it would be a 1 week game, and then the semifinals and the finals would be a 2 week game like normal. But during that 1 week, that week 13, if you have divisions, it could be division winners. If not, it could just be your top two guys could play each other for nothing other than whoever wins gets to pick their opponent out of the rest of the playoff teams. And so that way it gets rid of it makes it more fair because it gets rid of, oh well, I had to play Nico because he was 4 seed and I was 1, but I would have rather played Stu because he was 3 seed, but he had a couple guys injured or something like that. So it makes it to where the 1 seed definitely gets to play the best team for them. So the worst team that they think is going to show out that week.
Yeah, one thing I really like about having the fantasy playoffs like that is because, for as Gino was saying, if you ever find some competition that maybe it's the 2 seed, if you want to play the 2 seed right away to get them done early in the playoffs, because maybe I don't know, maybe that just you're feeling good that week, you got good matchups or something. It's really nice to have that because the number 1 seed should just be able to pick who they play. I mean, they're number 1 seed, and that just makes it a lot more fair for whoever that is.
And we've had many instances in our league where if the person that ended up losing in the championship or losing in a semifinal would have played someone else in the semifinal, they would have actually won the championship because they scored more points in weeks 15 and 16 than the eventual champion did than any other playoff team did. So if they just would have got a different matchup in the semifinals, they would have had the championship rather than some fourth or third or fourth place. So that's what we're looking at for next year, and we can come back to this year now. So this year we're not playing in week 17. The championships will be 15, 16. Next year we're looking at 16 and 17 since it's going to be an 18-week schedule. So we'll go back to this year now. And I've got a question for you guys. And obviously, this whole coronavirus thing has been happening, and everyone's not gathering per se in like stadiums of hundreds of thousands of people. So if coronavirus makes the stadiums empty or partially empty, does that affect fantasy at all?
Yeah, it definitely could. The crowd sometimes brings motivations to the team, and if they're not going to be able to be present, that can maybe not put the motivation on a team that it needs to win its couple games. So,
Yeah, see, one thing I think about this though is although the fans definitely create a big momentum and a great atmosphere in the stadium, another thing you still think about is like there's still a lot of players on a football team. And they're all there with one passion, that's to play football. So I mean, they're all there to hype each other up. So I mean, it'll be good to see, but I don't know. Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
See, I just can't imagine like people like Russell Wilson without those crazy fans in Seattle, or even Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City's known for their rowdy fans. That I think that's just going to affect the game so much. If Patrick Mahomes or Russell Wilson goes down in a game, the fan energy can rally them back. And I don't know if the fans aren't there, I don't know how much of that rally they're gonna get. Like maybe if they're down in 3 games, they'll come back in one. Whereas if the fans were there, they'll come back in all three or two of them, and that means more fantasy points. So all right. We're gonna get into the full schedule now. The full NFL schedule was released, and we're going to analyze because fantasy football is a weekly game. You're not looking to draft the players that are going to score you the most points over the entire season. You're drafting players that are going to score you the most points per week because it doesn't matter how many points you score for the entire season. You could be the highest scoring team in in the league and still have like a 500 record because you just got beat weekly. And so you have to win per week. It's all about the weekly game, and matchups are a big part of that. So if your guys are facing if your best guys are facing the worst defenses, you're gonna get so many points out of that that you need the guy to go for 20 points, and he could easily do that. He could go off for 40 because he's playing a terrible defense. But if you're in a game where the final score is like 7-3 and it's an absolute defensive battle, then your offensive guys aren't going to get fantasy points. So the matchups are a big part of it, and the schedule being released gives us all of those matchups. And we're going to analyze the schedule, and I'm going to get a little bit mathy on you guys here,
So the face of the jar is pi times radius squared.
and we're going to use the last year's fantasy points given up per position, but take that with a little bit of caution because the traditional measure of the strength of schedule versus the actual year-end strength of schedule. So this is preseason, looking at it preseason from the last season, and after the season's over, measuring that to the preseason rankings has almost no correlation. There's like absolutely no correlation there, and so be careful because teams make defensive offseason moves. Defenses get better, bring in new coaches, all that kind of stuff makes a ton of difference when it comes to defensive play per team. One team could have the worst defense in the league one year in fantasy relevance, and then come back the next year and you that's the matchup you are avoiding your offensive guys. So take it with a grain of salt. But this year, in the pass and the rush, the New York Giants have the worst overall defense, the worst overall schedule against defenses. So their matchups are going to be the toughest against both pass and rush. On the other hand, the LA Chargers will have the easiest in both pass and rush. So that means boost your guys like Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, all of those guys, and downgrade your guys like Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, those guys. So what do you guys think about that?
I mean, one thing I'm really excited to see is that young Giants offense that a lot of people are saying they have a lot of potential coming up, which I mean they do. You know, Saquon Barkley is a good running back, but personally, I think if in a fantasy way, I think I'm gonna be staying away from all Giant players as much as possible unless I can get them for a great value.
Yeah, along with Stewie was saying, with the first 4 games the Giants have to play, it's Pittsburgh, Chicago, San Francisco, and LA Rams. So that's not the best first 4 starts that you want to have to a game. So
And at Dallas too in
yep,
week 5.
and if you want to keep going, Washington, Philly, like Tampa Bay, that is a team that
Not ideal.
a lot of good defenses right off rip. So
So what we're saying here is that if you want Saquon Barkley, you can take Saquon Barkley. It's not like he's going to do bad, but his matchups aren't going to leave you salivating at the mouth when you're going into week 1 and you're looking at your team and you're like, man, like my my best player, the one that I picked to carry my team, is not going to have the greatest matchup. And I don't know if you necessarily want that. So I would actually downgrade Saquon because of the matchups to where you only get him if you're getting an extremely good value out of him because you don't want him to have to carry your team with those kind of matchups.
true.
Yeah, another thing is when I'm doing my fantasy, when I'm looking at my lineup, that's like the number one thing I look for is what kind of defenses they're going against because I feel like just I don't know, it's just it's a nicer feeling knowing that they're going against not such a powerhouse of a defense, even if they're a great player, because you never know if they're gonna get shut out. So I like having good matchups.
The quarterback's not proven either, so you don't even know how he's going to be playing next season, and if he doesn't play the best, they can stack the box, so that you're screwed. You can screw yourself.
What about on the other end with the Chargers and the easiest schedule in both pass and rush?
I think that that's just gonna make if they want to bring in Justin Herbert, that's just gonna make that easier for a rookie to transition. So Eckler, I think that's just gonna he's just gonna produce just like he did last year. So what do you guys think?
Uh, I'm liking the Chargers in this upcoming year after seeing their defensive or the defense they're playing against rating. I think picking up Chargers this year would be a lot better than any other year because usually they're kind of an iffy team. But with the matchups, I think that picking up Chargers would be a pretty good idea.
All right, so let's get into some interesting single matchups of the season. This is what everyone looks at when the NFL schedule is released. We have some matchups that might be, the most viewed of the year, and things like I'm looking at the Bucks versus the Saints, Tampa Bay and New Orleans. They'll play each other twice this year because they're in the same division, and that'll be the Tom Brady versus Drew Brees show, week 1 and week 10. Both of those both of those weeks. Week 1 will be in New Orleans, and week 10 will be in Tampa Bay. What are you guys looking at out of that matchup for fantasy?
So obviously both teams have pretty good defenses, but I just think the rivalry between Tom Brady and Drew Brees, there's just going to be a lot of passing touchdowns. I think there's just going to be a lot of offense shootouts in those games. So having anybody on either team for the offense would be nice.
Yeah, I think in the first matchup, Brady's playing with a new team, so I think in the first one I'm gonna take the Saints, and then in the second one I'm probably gonna be leaning based on what the season's going. I'll probably be leaning more towards Tampa Bay. I think once Brady gets the hang of that offense, then I think that their team's gonna be unstoppable.
All right, another good matchup is the opener. The NFL opener is going to be on Thursday night. Houston Texans at Kansas City Chiefs. That'll be the Deshaun Watson versus Pat Mahomes show, um, in prime time. And what do you guys are looking at fantasy from that perspective?
I think it's going to be a fun one, especially for Deshaun Watson because he doesn't have DeAndre Hopkins anymore. You don't know how much that's gonna affect his Deshaun Watson's fantasy value, but I think it's gonna be pretty good. Adding David Johnson, adding Brandon Cooks.
Remember that time when the Texans, went 24-0, and then Pat Mahomes
Yeah,
showed up.
yeah.
Yeah, and that
We all remember that time.
right, and that matchup, I definitely got the Chiefs. I think that Mahomes probably is gonna score on him, and I don't think Watson can come back with the answer.
Too many weapons too out in Kansas City, especially adding the rookie.
All right, we'll get into some other interesting notes from the schedule. So the Rams open up their new stadium against Dallas in Week 1, uh, bringing in a pretty tough opponent to open up a brand new stadium. We'll see how the Rams do this year. The Chargers are also playing in that stadium. I don't think they open it at home until like Week 2. So in weeks 11 and 16, speaking of the Chargers, Melvin Gordon goes back to face LA. That should be a fun one. Or not one, two. We get two of those matchups. And also in week 16, Carolina at Washington. Ron Rivera goes against his old team there. And in weeks 10 and 12, this one's actually kind of weird. In weeks 10 and 12, the Jets and Dolphins play consecutive games against each other. So they both have a bye in week 11, and they both play each other in weeks 10 and 12. So they play each other, and then once they're done playing each other, the next team that they're setting up for is each other. So that's kind of funny. I don't think that's happened until like it's since 2007 or something like that. And in week 17, every NFL team will be playing within their division. We're not playing fantasy football in week 17, but that should be fun to watch from a football perspective with the matchups that could possibly happen with playoff implications, NFL playoff implications. So that's all for the schedule. We are going to go into a little new segment we have here. It's going to be called Regress or Impress. And we're going to get back to the math thing on here. The Regress or Impress is going to be whether the player that we mention, we're going to throw out some names here, the player that we mention is either going to impress, meaning they're going to do the same as they did last year or better, or they're going to regress towards the average at that position. So, just as an example, say Matt Ryan scored 266 points last year. The average was 261. He either impresses, does 266 or better, or regresses towards the 261 or under the 261, which is the average for a quarterback, the top 25 quarterbacks. We'll do top 35 running backs, 35 wide receivers, and 15 tight ends. So, Nico, let's hear the first name.
We got Kyler Murray, Arizona. Stewie, how you feeling about Kyler Murray this year?
I'm a big Kyler Murray fan. I think that next year that their offense is gonna be unstoppable. I'm definitely impressed out of Kyler Murray.
I I think Kyler Murray is going to impress also. I mean, if he has another year to work and he's getting more weapons with DeAndre Hopkins in there, I just think there's no way that he can go under what he did last year, which was 282.28 compared to the average of 261. And he's going to be up there with the guys you're going to be wanting to taking like at the top of your quarterback board, not at the top of the draft, unless you're running a two quarterback league like we are, and then it's different. But your Pat Mahomes, your Lamar Jacksons, your Deshaun Watsons, those guys, Kyler Murray's in that mix as of right now.
Yep, I'm unimpressed with Kyler Murray. Um, they a lot of his players were saying that he has grown as a QB super fast. So with him getting into year two, along with what Gino said about DeAndre Hopkins coming in and his ability to be able to run too, I think he's going to be putting up a lot of fantasy points.
All right, another quarterback.
Josh Allen, Josh Allen. Yeah, that actually is right. Josh Allen, Buffalo. I thought I said that wrong.
Yeah, I'm a definite impressed from Josh Allen. I think that with the new signing of Stephon Diggs, I think it's gonna open up a lot in their passing game, and I think that he's definitely going to impress in this upcoming season.
See, Josh Allen's a good quarterback, but he did really good last year. Like, he did better than Kyler Murray last year. The only guys that were above him were Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, and believe it or not, Jameis Winston. So Josh Allen is he's gonna do okay. It's not like you're not gonna want him on your team. He's actually a very good value pick because there's gonna be a lot of other quarterbacks that are gonna be going before Josh Allen that will probably end up doing worse than Josh Allen. But I think he's gonna regress towards the average here because he scored 297 points last year, and that was sixth in scoring amongst quarterbacks. I don't think he can do better than sixth. And that's not saying he's going to do bad. That just kind of saying that the other guys are going to do a little bit better. But that's also not saying that you don't want him on your team. I actually kind of want him on my team because he's a good value pick right now.
I'm impressed with Josh Allen. I think him going into year 3, just a more knowledgeable QB now. Add a great weapon with Stephon Diggs. He finally has his highlight player. John Brown and Cole Beasley are good, but they're not the highlight player that Josh Allen needs, like Stephon Diggs. So I think with his mobile ability too, I think he's definitely gonna impress.
One more quarterback.
Um, Aaron Rodgers, Green Bay.
Keep on running from that pain, I feel like Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, see, me personally, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be a regress. I think that as he gets older, he loses that umph in his game that he always had. I feel like he's not going to make those spectacular plays that he always was. Not that I'm saying he's going to be a bad quarterback, but I think that he's not going to perform as he did last season.
Yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers is also a regress here. They took Jordan Love. I'm guessing just to back up Aaron Rodgers, maybe to push him to do better, but I just don't think he can. He's lost, just as you said, Sue. He's lost that pop in his game. He's lost the drive to get there, and especially with only one weapon. He's got Devonte Adams, and that's about it. Um, I just don't think Aaron Rodgers can do better than what he did last year, which was just around the average. I think he'll go below the average this year, even with Jordan Love pushing him to do better. I just don't necessarily think the Green Bay offense is going to do as well as they did last year in total. So I can't see Aaron Rodgers besting his last year's average.
I'm gonna go with Regress also. Like everybody's saying, Aaron Rodgers is getting older. It already seems like they're trying to replace all the skills positions in Green Bay, adding quarterback and running back when both of them are already good. So, and they failed to address the need of wide receiver, and there are straight stars in there. So
Yeah, I mean, they had a chance to get Aaron Rodgers another weapon, and they just didn't. And you can start getting older and start getting worse at football, like in Tom Brady's sense. He's not as good as he was previously, but you surround him by weapons, and he's going to do good. Like in Tampa Bay, I don't think he does bad because there's so many people there to help him do good. I mean, you got Gronk and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and their new running back draftee. With Aaron Rodgers, he doesn't have those kinds of weapons. I mean, he's got one of the best receivers in the league, but defenses can double team him and leave Aaron Rodgers with the options of Devin Funchess and Lazard. I don't think he can do as well with second tier options rather than the elites of wide receivers.
and not to mention also they do not have the best offensive line. It's kind of just been regressing, like, other than that left tackle that they have, but he's about it. So, all right, running backs we got Joe Mixon. Stewie, what do you got to say about Joe Mixon?
Uh, I think Joe Mixon's going to be a lot better than he was last year. I think having Joe Burrow by his side is going to help him out a lot. I think it can open up Cincinnati's offense a lot more. Last year, they really struggled on offense. I think with Joe Burrow and Joe Mixon, I think they could have a little connection, and I think we'll get a lot more open running opportunities instead of like forced running opportunities. So I think he's definitely going to increase next year.
It's the Joe show in Cincy. Um, Joe Mixon's a little bit of a weird one here. He's going to be, for me, a regress and an impress um, at the same time because he was actually under the average last year. He scored 177 points, and the average was 184. So he is going to regress towards the average, meaning that he's going to increase in production because the average is higher than what he did last year. And he's also going to impress because he's going to do better than he did last year. And I definitely think Joe Mixon is the guy to have his breakout season now too, because he's got the he's got the support he needs now. He's got the franchise quarterback that they're hoping in Joe Burrow, and he the wide receivers are good. We'll see how the coaching does, and I think this could be a good year for Sissy.
Yeah, I agree with Gino. I for sure think this is an impress. Adding Joe Burrow just spreads out the offense a little bit more, and I think Joe Mixon will get more pass catches in the backfield, and also that offensive line is improved even from like 2 years ago because last year their first round pick was hurt all last year, so he wasn't even being able to play. So new and improved offensive line next year. I think he's gonna do really good. Next running back, Miles Sanders. Stewie, impress or regress?
I think Miles Sanders is definitely going to be an impress next season after sorting out their roster doing in the running back category, dropping Jordan Howard, who's taking a lot of carries. I think this year that Miles Sanders is going to perform a ton better. And I feel like the Philadelphia offense is gonna be much smoother than last year.
Yeah, without Jordan Howard in there, and with what we think is going to end up being the Miles Sanders show, like he's going to be the workhorse back, and if he is, I mean, if he's not, then we're definitely going to downgrade him. But if he is what we think he's going to be, the workhorse back, then I think this is his year. He's definitely going to impress, and he might be up within the elite tier of running backs, like next to the top 10 running backs. That is just going to be the plug and play options where you're going to start that guy every week, no matter what matchup he has, because he's going to get you points. And it could be like that this year.
Yeah, definitely impressed with Miles Sanders. That offensive line just has too many all pros for him not to be a really good running back for fantasy. And they also had additions like Jalen Rieger in the draft, so maybe it can spread the offense a little bit more. So I like Miles Sanders a lot. We got Austin Eckler for our next running back. Stewie, what do you got to say about Austin Eckler?
See, I think Austin Eckler is going to be a good running back next year, but I'm still going to have to go with regress because I don't think there's any way that he managed to do the same over top what he did last year. Also, they're getting rid of Melvin Gordon, so he's going to get more touches. But then again, one thing that I like is when there's two running backs that are competing against each other, I feel like his drive's going to work a lot harder. I don't know if Eckler's going to have that killer instinct if he doesn't have any competition.
Yeah, I also think a regress on Eckler here, but he's still going to be a great running back. He's going to be one of the matchup guys. We were talking about the schedule earlier, and the LA Chargers have the easiest rush schedule in terms of fantasy. Um, I don't think that Austin Eckler long term is going to get the points he did last year. Like he was fifth in scoring amongst running backs in half PPR at 249, while the average was 184. And so I think he's going to go towards the average long term. But he's going to be your matchup dependent guy where you can put him in if he's playing a bad team and get possibly a lot of points out of him that week and maybe win your week because of that. And I don't think he's gonna be I don't think you want him to be the guy that you build your team around though. Like you don't want him to be the foundation of your team. And so I think right now his value is that. I think he will go around the top to where he's going to be the foundation of somebody's team. But if from now to the draft he doesn't he drops in value and people start like downgrading him a little bit, he starts dropping in value to where you can pick up a guy to be the base of your team before you pick up Austin Eckler, I think it's a great pick.
I'm an impressed because I think he'll have the same numbers around what he did last year, and he was a top 5 running back last year, and he wasn't even the number one running back on the team that was getting the most rushes. So I think with Melvin Gordon getting out of there, I think he's gonna see a lot more runs, and he's still gonna be very dominant in the passing game. So I'm a go on Austin Eckler.
All right, we'll move on to wide receivers now.
All right, Cooper Cup, Stewie.
Uh, for me, I think that Cooper Cup's definitely gonna be a big regress. I think that the numbers he put up last season, I just don't think it's achievable for him again, especially after the Rams letting go of Todd Gurley. I feel like that's just gonna basically just narrow down their offense more in the air. Um, and I just think that he's not gonna have the ability to put up the numbers he had last year. So I think it's gonna be a regress.
Yeah, Cooper Cup's a definite regress for me too. Um, he had 204 points in half PPR last year, and that was sixth in scoring. That's kind of unbelievable, but he was over guys like Julian Edelman and Mike Evans and Keenan Allen, Jarvis Landry, Stephon Diggs. I mean, I can't see him getting over those guys this year again. He has to regress towards the average, and maybe he'll do good, but the average might go a little bit higher with all of those guys going for more points. At least I think going above Cooper Cup.
Yeah, so I like Cooper Cup. I like Jared Goff a little bit more, I think, than both you do too. And also to add the Cooper Cup and Goff combination, he always just finds the ball to put in Cooper Cup's hands. So I think adding or taking away Todd Gurley, taking away Brandon Cooks adds more volume to Woods and Cooper Cup, and I don't see them making a super far drop of what they did. So I'm a impressed on Cooper Cup.
So, Nico, do you think that with that offense being more narrowed down in the air and Jared Goff not having the best throwing arm, do you think with it being such a narrow offense, you think that Cooper Cup's gonna start getting double teamed, or you think he's gonna be all right?
I don't know if they're gonna be able to just to do that because you still have Woods on the other side, and you still see players where still able to get pretty good production, like Terry McLaurin. You know, basically being the only threat at Washington, and he was still seeing pretty good volume. So I think Cooper Cup can match the same thing as he did last year.
Look at our guest coming in here asking questions.
All
You've
right.
made yourself known, Stewie. All right, next wide receiver, Nico.
Tyler Lockett, baby. Stewie, what do you guys say about Tyler Lockett?
I'm a big fan of Tyler Lockett. I think that he fits perfectly in Seattle's offense. I think that him and Russell Wilson have a pretty good connection and pretty good at finding him on the deep ball. So I think he's a pretty good receiver. I think he's going to impress next year, especially if he's doing kick returns again. He also could sneak you a few points off those. So
Yeah, Tyler Lockett he's around average right now. So he's 180, average is 179. And I think he'll probably stay around the average. So I'm gonna say impressed because he'll stay about where he is because he's pretty consistent. I mean, Russell Wilson's consistent. So I can't see him going lower. I can't really see him going higher. Maybe he does have a few good games that pushes him over that limit. And so I'll say impress, but just barely.
Yeah, I'm gonna say impressed too. You add any receiver to Russell Wilson, they're definitely gonna put up some fantasy points. And Tyler Lockett's a guy who can make those highlight plays for Russell Wilson. So give me Tyler Lockett over 180. All right. So Stephon Diggs, what do you guys say about Stephon Diggs, Stewie?
I think Stephon Diggs is basically the last piece of the puzzle in Buffalo's offense. I think that with Stephon Diggs there, they always had they got Beasley and Brown. They're both pretty good receivers, but no one like a big play, a deep route runner that you can just kind of chuck it up to and just think that they're going to come down with it or throw like a 50-50 and have hope in it. And I think that him and Josh Allen work pretty good together, so I'm a big increase in Stephon Diggs' game.
Yeah, Alex Stephon Diggs also basically just about what Stu said there with the wide receiver room in Buffalo might be one of the best in the NFL. And so Stephon Diggs has the support behind him, and you saw how good he did with Adam Thielen in support in Minnesota, and now he's got a better quarterback, I would say, in Josh Allen, and he's not your elite quarterback, but he's definitely good, and this could be his year to break out as the true wide receiver one in Buffalo, a piece that they definitely needed for a little bit.
Yep, I am also impressed too. I'd like to add on to what Gino was saying. Just add in like a big arm that Josh Allen has and an amazing route runner that's Stephon Diggs. That's just perfect for a wide receiver one out in Buffalo. I think Diggs is gonna put up a good amount of numbers, so give me Diggs.
One tight end for the day.
Mark Andrews. How you guys feeling about Mark Andrews?
Personally, I'm not. I think that he's gonna make big regress. I think that I feel like he's just not gonna have the year that he had last year. I mean, they do have the great running game in Baltimore, which that definitely is what defenses are looking for, and which should open up Mark Andrews. But personally, I'm not a big fan of Lamar Jackson's throwing arm. I just don't think that someone that doesn't get targeted that much, like a tight end, I don't think I'd want Lamar Jackson throwing it to him. So I'm against Mark Andrews.
So I'm kind of partial to Mark Andrews. I like Mark Andrews. The top two tight ends last year in scoring in half PPR leagues were Travis Kelsey at 1 and Mark Andrews at 2. And Mark Andrews at 2, at second in scoring amongst tight ends in the NFL. I don't think he can repeat that. That's 175 points. That's over 40 above the average for tight ends. And I don't think he can repeat that. It's not that he's going to be bad. I mean, the Ravens offense will probably be just as electric as it was last year, probably even more electric. But you're talking about you're talking about a very slim margin where to impress, Mark Andrews would have to be the top scoring tight end in the league. That's very hard to say right now. That's a bold statement to say.
Yeah, just like Gino was saying, he's got to put up another great year as a tight end. And on that team, there are a lot of other weapons. And I don't know. I don't think he would even be like top three out there right now. They've added a lot more other weapons too throughout the season. So I just think his volume goes down and he doesn't reach what he did last year.
All right, that concludes our regress or impress segment. I think that was pretty informative, pretty fun.
Yes,
We're
sir.
gonna get something a little more fun. Let's go to the shit show of the day. And we're just gonna sit here and laugh while you guys figure out what's gonna happen. We have a guest on the show today. If you haven't noticed already, if you skipped to this part of the show, you were so eager to hear this. Stewie's on the show today, and there hasn't been that much news in the NFL right now, so we're gonna deviate a little bit from the NFL for the shit show today, and we're gonna talk about our friend Stewie right here to my right. We started our league in 2015. We didn't hand the trophy out until 2016 though. 2015 was kind of a test year, and then 2016 we really got into it. But 2015, some of us had played fantasy before, some of us hadn't. Stewie was the one who hadn't even basically watched football before.
Right. Yep.
And so when we came to the draft, we all had a basic knowledge of fantasy football, and we all conspired with each other to without Stu knowing to try and get Stu to make a terrible pick in the first round, just so that he would not have a good team. And it was the Jaguars defense. We were trying to get Stu to draft the Jaguars defense in the first round. And honestly, like we did pretty well at getting him to draft to draft them. We made it to where we were talking about the Jaguars defense, but not telling Stu to draft him. Like we said like let's not tell Stu like straight up like you have to draft the Jaguars defense. Let's just make it sound like the Jaguars defense are like
Oh,
the
man.
guys you want. Like that's like, oh, maybe I'll draft him second round, or if they drop to the third or something like that, maybe. I don't know, man. I kind of want him. I kind of want the running backs, and Stu did not have the first pick. he had like the 4th or 5th pick, and some good guys went off the board, 1 through 4. Some good running backs and wide receivers, and then Stu's on the clock, and Nico, if you want to take it from here.
And then all of a sudden, he picks up Jaguars defense, and everybody's like, and right away, I was just like, Gino, we got to redraft. And everybody's like, oh my God. He's like, no, where he's keeping the team.
He's keeping the team. The dude drafted Jaguars defense 1st round. I couldn't believe it, to be honest. Like, I thought he was just gonna look at the rankings on like his phone and be like, yeah, they're just messing with me, and take take the good guy that he should have. But he drafted Jaguars defense 1st round, and it was hilarious.
Yeah, that was pretty
So,
funny.
Stu, I'll give you the chance now for probably the first time ever to actually defend yourself here.
Right. So I was coming into fantasy football, probably watched 2 NFL games in my life. Didn't really care about it at all. And I was like, I'll just do it just because everyone else is doing it. It'll be funny or whatever. So I was drafting, and then so I got there, and they're all talking about the Jaguars defense and stuff, trying to trick me or whatever. And then so I get on my phone to go and draft, and I'm looking through it, and I had one of my friends by my side. I can't remember who it was, but they told me they're like, "Oh, I'll look it up for you." And they looked up the Jaguars defense, and I was like, "Oh, okay, whatever. I'll just pick 'em." So I just put 'em in my queue, and then I right when my pick came up, drafted them, and then all of a sudden I heard every one of my ears just laughing and crying away at my pick. But yeah, it was a tough one. It was a tough
We've
one.
had some moments in our fantasy leagues and we'll get to all the other moments throughout the podcast. I'm sure you'll hear just about everything, but this was definitely one of the funniest
This
ones.
was a start off.
This kicked off the league.
And then next year he made it to the championship. So
Yeah, the very next year, in 2016, the first year we handed out the trophy, he named his team Jaguars defense. He ended up drafting the Jaguars defense too, but like later in the draft where he should have drafted them, and ended up going all the way to the championship game. And now he's one of 4 people that have their names on that trophy. So good for Stu.
Yep,
It turned
Jaguars
out good.
defense. Jaguars defense on the
redemption,
trophy.
redemption.
All right. Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Incline podcast. You can find us basically anywhere. Twitter at Fantasy Incline. If you want to watch us on YouTube, or if you're watching us on YouTube already, you just search the Fantasy Incline podcast. If you're listening to us on Spotify, we are now on Apple Podcast also. If you want to watch us, you go to YouTube. And thanks for listening. We'll be back soon.